Welcome once again to the Radical Imagination. I'm your host, Jim Vrettos. The fourth annual Hamptons JazzFest is presently running from July to September, introducing world-class jazz and Grammy award-winning jazz musicians to thousands of people at a variety of venues across the Hamptons. The East End is returning to its roots as a vital scene of live music. The hope is that the festival will draw people from all over the world who would bring along their customs and traditions and, of course, their music. That will help reunite the East End with today's wider multicultural movements. JazzFest has already become a tradition and is doing just that. For the first time, Jazz at Lincoln Center will co-present 4 concerts at the Parish Art Museum in South Hampton. It's the culmination of a multi-decade business and artistic relationship between JazzFest program director, founder, and board member Joel Christ and Jazz at Lincoln Center. We're proud to welcome Joel to the Radical Imagination for the first time. He's been one of the top booking agents in the music industry for 40 years and has built productive partnerships with nearly all the arts organizations in the area, allowing the JazzFest to tap into a world of musicians they wouldn't have access to without him. Joel's love for all kinds of jazz, his desire to share that love with the community, has helped reshape the image of jazz to a larger audience and gets people in the door who normally wouldn't have come.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here.
It really is. We're in the East Hampton Library, where actually we first met and had a 2-hour discussion on all kinds of things. And you are a world of information in the music world and beyond. But tell us a little about, you've been in this business well over 40 years in the city, and now you're out here.
Yes.
For the last 7-8 years or so you've moved out.
Yeah, about 7 years I've been here. And I really came out here for rest and relaxation. And
here you
maybe to look at a point in time where I could retire and just play music and listen to music and read books and do all the things I love to do in my spare time. And as it happens, I just miss the music too much. And I got tired of going back into the city to see shows and to hang out with all my musical associates. So
you had an office, you were located in the East Village?
Right in the village.
In the village.
Right on Broadway and A Street. It was the office was on 300 Mercer Street, which I had for about 20 years there. And then I had an apartment office on A Street, which I did for another 15 or 16 years. We had a couple of offices during those 36 or 37 years that I had the booking agency going.
I got to ask you, so how did this all get started? Did your folks played jazz? You were here when you was a little kid, or no? What?
I mean, it really has to do with a bigger category, which is the universal category of music. And I really, I fell in love with pop music when I was a kid. As a teenager, the rock and roll.
Involved with the girls, right? You got to be hip on that.
But it was even. I would have done it without the girls.
I know. I'm teasing.
If I wanted to really get the girls, I would have learned how to play better than I do. Because I think what the young ladies admired is the talent and the romance of dating and being with musicians.
But do you play?
I do play, but I was not much of a young musician. I dabbled on the drums. I dabbled, whatever, mainly the guitar. And then I became as serious as an amateur can be. I didn't study at any conservatory, but I hung around so many musicians. So, in my mid-teens, before I went to college, I I bought a nice guitar for $400 or whatever, and decided to teach myself. And then in early college, I found a couple of teachers.
Where'd you go to school? You were down in the village?
Well, yeah, I went to a few different schools, but I graduated from Stony Brook.
Okay. I
And
Island. All right.
yes,
State University.
I went up to Ithaca. I studied guitar at the New School. I studied history and English at Hofstra University.
You made the rounds.
Yes, I did. College wasn't really in my plans after high school, and then I realized I didn't have anything better to do.
Yeah.
But
still, okay. So you're roaming around here.
yes.
So now, how'd you get started with this in this office and in the business?
Yeah, it was something I wanted to do in college, and I promoted some shows in college, and I was the arts editor of a couple of college newspapers at Stony Brook and Hofstra. And then when I got out of school, I interviewed at all the record companies and radio stations and all kinds of people who are involved in the music business. And they wanted you to intern, and they wanted you to work for minimum wage, or wanted you to do stuff I couldn't afford to do.
Now this is 80s?
Yeah, very early 80s. I graduated college in 1979. And so
the music scene was folk, rock. What about jazz now?
Yeah, I mean, it went from being a groupie and a follower of all great jazz bands in my teens, and from Steve Miller to Buffalo Springfield and Crosby, Stills and Nash. And at some point, from playing music, and also in my family, my father was a big music buff. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of classical music around, a lot of opera around, but he was a jazz fan as well. Mm-hmm. Before, like Charlie Parker, before bebop era. He was he loved swing music.
40s and 50s.
More 30s and 40s.
The Dorsey Band and Benny Goodman.
And some of the singers.
Glenn Miller.
Benny Goodman was big.
Benny Goodman was okay.
Was Artie Shaw.
Okay.
Charlie Christian, Teddy Wilson.
Yeah,
Count Basie.
I remember, right.
Art Tatum.
Yeah. Art Blakely?
A little later. That wasn't really in my father's wheelhouse. But Art Blakely was a very important guy to me. Right. Not only listening, but as a friend who helped me start my business. So
the Jazz Messengers. Right?
Yes, the Jazz Messengers. A legendary band to this day. Blakey's been gone for many years, but his disciples became my friends.
His daughter, is his daughter still alive?
I'm sure she is. I don't remember her that well.
I remember I had a very close friend who was very close friends with her. Mm-hmm. And I remember my friend staying over. She would call at 3:00 in the morning.
Yeah.
And say, "Okay, what do you want to do tonight?" Now we thought the next night. She said, "No,
tonight, right?
3:00 in the morning is when you get started."
An improvised life.
Yeah.
So the jazz thing really came to me in mid to late high school. I had a couple of really precocious friends, some of whom went to private school, and they had more of a instruction in culture and arts and music. And they'd come back from
mixed racially. Or more at that point, still white?
I grew up in those years. I was born in Brooklyn, but I grew up in those years in Great Neck, which was a white Jewish suburb of New York City. So the people I hung out with who were music fans at the time were people much like me.
Yeah.
And they're still friends to this day. But there was one guy by the name of Bobby Stein who went to private school, and he came back with John Coltrane albums and Miles Davis records and Jim Hall records, and
introduced you, and you had a love of that too.
And what happened? I was beginning to understand the guitar a little bit, and after playing or trying to learn rock and roll and blues music a little bit, I got this feeling that there was something beyond that. harmonically, rhythmically,
Mhm.
historically. You know, rock and roll really only became a scene and a musical form in the 50s.
The rock, the blues were all interesting, but you were looking for something beyond, and something in your heart and soul.
Yeah,
And
and it came from being advancing as a player and wanting to know a little bit about more harmonic ideas. What happens when you don't play only major and minor chords? Not to get too deep into the weeds musically.
No, do please.
But yeah, I heard things growing up: classical music, opera. I heard ethnic music, Irish music, Jewish music, Eastern European music. And so I knew that there was a huge universe out there of sounds and music. And I was, at a certain point in time, 16, 17 years old, I had an idea that was really of interest to me to try to explore the world of.
So what did you
sounds.
find? What did you find? I mean, in other words, help us understand the audience, myself. I mean, does it go back to gospel and also?
I mean, it goes back. It goes back to Africa.
Goes back to the drums.
Yes,
which you studied. Which you.
I did. Before I knew that was a source of rhythmic conception
and communication.
Community. Right. That's true. But yeah, I didn't know where it was going. I had no completely linear or concrete idea of where I was taking myself. But it just keeps unfolding as it still does today. It doesn't end. I learned that music doesn't. Your study of music never ends. Your study of history doesn't end. There's every time I think I've heard every jazz record ever made, I wake up in the morning and find the whole new group of people.
Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that keeps so all right, so this awareness becomes more and more apparent. Who do you first sign up here? Go after or attracts you to
So what happened, and we should get off just talking about myself so I can talk about other things as well. But the idea was when I graduated college, I needed to make a living, and I studied journalism, English, history. So I ended up working for magazines, trade magazines. I ended up working for Better Homes and Gardens, writing speeches for their advertising salespeople.
Yeah.
And then I was in my late 20s, and I said, I got to take one more shot before I hit 30.
Before you go off to the great gardening gods in the sky here.
Before I start taking on responsibility that needs a steady paycheck. Right. So I quit. Well, they fired me. I don't even remember. And I went back to the clubs that I worked at in college and right after college, the Bottom Line Club, which is a famous club in New York.
Bleecker,
right? Right, where I ended up having an office a couple of blocks away. And
Harlem? Did you get up to Harlem?
No, I never worked up in Harlem. I went up there to visit musicians who lived up there. But I went to the Bottom Line, and I said to Alan Pepper and Stanley Stadowski were the owners of the club. And I said, can I have a job? And they put me as floor manager as the title, but it was basically a doorman. And so I did that at night for 2.5 years while I did my writing during the day. And then I just ended up. They
would have an eclectic group of musicians come there. Right?
Yes, right. So it wasn't a jazz thing.
It wasn't a purely jazz club, but they would.
They had great jazz musicians. Sonny Rollins did 1 or 2 dates a year. Right. The Brecker Brothers did a bunch of dates there. Bobby Hutcherson.
So people got to know you. You begin to know them.
Yes. And I would when I wasn't working, I was hanging out at the jazz clubs. So and then I went from the Bottom Line to a very dedicated jazz club by the name of Sweet Basil's.
Yeah,
which
I
was
remember
downtown
Summer 70.
South, right? 770 South. And I ended up, when I left Better Homes and Gardens, I went to Mel and Phyllis, who I knew because I hung out at the club for many years by then, 10 years. And I said, I need a job. And so I got whatever the step right above doorman is the job they gave me.
Okay.
So I was seating people, and
Yeah.
and
Usher doorman.
yeah, you're right.
No, but seriously,
Yeah.
those clubs aren't there anymore.
Right.
And you worked with the people that were there.
Right.
Now you're right. Okay, because we can talk for hours now.
Right.
So, but let's move on to what you're essentially doing now, which is a continuation of what you were doing when you were a kid.
Yeah.
This JazzFest that you and your partners have founded here.
Yeah, the
last
two
4 years.
really amazing people who I work with on Jazz Festival is Claes Brondell and John Landis.
Okay.
And there's great musician out here, Bill O'Connell, who helps us a lot. So there's a few of us who are kind of really dedicated to keep this thing going, well, to start it and keep it going. What happened when I moved out here 7 years ago, I discovered that there was a little burger joint in Sag Harbor called Bay Burger, which John Landis owned. His kids ran it, but he owned it. And he became friends with Claes Brondell, I don't know, 14, 15 years ago. Claes came from Denmark with us and settled here. He was a jazz and a good drummer, a professional drummer. And he asked John to have a jam session once a week in the Bay Burger.
And you were filling a vacuum.
They did it before I got involved. This is 14 years ago.
I see.
They did this jam session once a week. And then when I moved out here and I discovered the Bay Burger, I went there and they, every once in a while, they would have ringers from New York City come out and play the jam session. And I knew all the guys.
Right.
So I started hanging out. Claes realized that somehow I was deeply involved in the music business.
You're being modest here.
I didn't,
because seriously, I'm going to speak for you.
Okay.
You raised this to a totally different level.
But this is at the beginning. I came out here really not to work. But when Claes, when I went to this Bay Burger jam session and got to know Claes Brondell, they quickly invited me to one of their board meetings because it's a 501c3 corporation, nonprofit corporation. That was kind of the umbrella organization behind the Bay Burger jam session. So,
but yeah, got it.
Okay.
But explain in your minds, the three of you and then the other associates, what were you trying to accomplish? What did you start with? Let's start with this sort of jazz, or help me out.
What happened was,
and so on.
I was invited to their board meeting, and I said, "You guys don't need me to do this jam session. You're doing a fine job. I have you have no use for me in that. But if you come to a point where you want to expand it to a festival, to a concert series, that's where I can be of use to you." And
it's not just the summer. The summer is, but this is year round now.
Right. It's 12 months a year is where it's at now. We do, the bulk of it is in the summer, about 30 dates a year from very early July to the middle of September. But then we do a winter series, and we still do this jam session once. Well, we're going to continue it. We stop during the summer, during the festival, because we don't have the staff to do it all. But in October, we're going to start the twice a month. I think we're going to do starting in October, maybe early November.
And there's an audience. When I said in my opening, thousands of people, you are really hitting a nerve here.
Yes.
Of need. It's not just the billionaires row here. There is a significant counterculture, if you will, artistic, literary group that are.
We invite billionaires as well.
Yes, especially and that's how it got your donor. They got started initially from the. I didn't.
I mean,
ostracize it if they want to be part, certainly. Yeah.
And we need to fundraise.
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time fundraising, and I invite people to go to our website, make a donation, or call me up, and we can talk about the festival, and I can explain to you how we operate. But yeah, after about 6 months of being involved with the board of the jam session, which we now call Jazz Night, and now it is at the Masonic Hall in Sag Harbor. And it's going to be Friday night starting in October. And we'll do every other Friday night. And Claes and I bring in great musicians from the city and we can't pay a lot, but they love to come out here. Yeah. We have a great room. We have great audiences. Right. It's very affordable. I think it's $20 at the door. Yeah. And we sell wine and beer for $5.
That's like the old days. Come on, down at the Bleecker Street there. Right?
Yes, like the Village Gate.
The Village Gate, which is no longer there.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So we still keep the jazz night alive. And then we do a monthly jazz series that we have a revolving venue locations from the Parish Art Museum to the South Hampton Art Center to the Bay Street Theater. And so
how do you know what you want to present? I was reading some of the things you've been writing about. It's very important, the room, the setting for the audience. So what do you think is what your audience wants to hear, or along with what you want to hear? How do you figure this all out?
Well,
so it does sell, and you have people coming in.
Yeah, I mean, I always hope that there's an audience for what I present, but I do start with my own loves and my own aesthetic attractions,
which
goes from straight ahead jazz, the Blue Note records of the 50s and 60s, all the way up to electronic music. We haven't done much with computer music, and I don't think we're going to head in that direction. But I know from more than 50 years listening to jazz music and being friendly with all the great players, I came up with the bebop guys. Those are the guys who helped me start my business. Mm-hmm. Everybody from Art Pepper and Phil Woods and Dexter Gordon and Art Blakey. Mm-hmm. And all the people came out of Art Blakey and Tommy Flanagan and Hank Jones and Milt Jackson and Art Farmer, Johnny Griffin. So I came up with them and learned some things about the music from an artistic standpoint.
You called it straight up jazz? Is that
mainstream or straight ahead jazz?
Straight ahead.
That comes out of the tradition. If you see jazz starting in New Orleans with Dixieland music, and then increasing, and Jelly Roll Morton, and then moving up the Mississippi River, to Kansas City, to Chicago, and then coming east to New York. So if you look at the early part of the 20th century in New Orleans, and by the time it got to Kansas City, it was more of a swing music. It wasn't a traditional Dixieland sound. Mm-hmm. And then by the time it got to Chicago,
more blues,
the guys like Bird, Charlie Parker, and Dizzy Gillespie, and Thelonious Monk, and Bud Powell.
When is Thelonious Monk or Sun Ra? I mean, some of the real.
Well, that
more the New York scene, or
Sun Ra was from Philly. He wasn't from Philly, but he made his headquarters, his band headquarters, and they all lived together in Philadelphia. The whole band lived in one house, which in the city of Philadelphia, they're trying to raise money to remodel the house and keep it from falling down. But
I heard him once, and wow.
Yeah, but that's I mean, Sun Ra started in the late 40s, but really didn't become Sun Ra until the mid 50s. The Sun Ra we recognize as this kind of free big band music. But no, it was really Charlie Parker. It was really Dizzy Gillespie in the very late 40s who took swing music out of Kansas City, which is where Charlie Parker was from, Kansas City.
Right.
And they invented a way to revolutionize the music from swing music with a certain rhythmic fundamental beat and a certain harmonic level of improvisation. And they subdivided things, they deconstructed things. And it was kind of, as Louis Armstrong said, it sounds like Chinese music. It sounds like Chinese music to me.
I didn't know. I realized he had that quote. Where do some of the singers come in?
Well, the singers were popular during the big band era.
The big band.
Yeah.
Okay.
So every big band featured a singer. Even Ellington had singers. Count Basie had Joel Williams. And a lot of Stan Kenton had a lot of singers, June Christie and Chris Connor. And Ella sang with a lot of the big bands.
Oscar Pierce,
Chuck Webb's big band. No, she sang with Oscar in small groups later on in the 60s and 70s. But yeah, the big band, the singers came about. I mean, the blues singers were around in the 20s. Ethel Waters, Ma Rainey. But the big band was a big popularizing force for the singers. But then when the music moved from New Orleans to Kansas City to Chicago to New York and all the medium-sized cities in between, it was really Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Thelonious Monk, who was in New York, and Bud Powell. I mean, there was a movement of a more sophisticated, and I'd say that with quotes around it, because all the music is highly sophisticated and meant for serious listeners and serious officials.
What do you mean by that? I mean, we're talking about. It's interesting. I was in the car the other day and listening to Tchaikovsky and some of the Russian composers.
Yes.
Rachmaninoff. I mean, that's serious listening.
Yes.
So classically, now
Yes.
Explain a little more what you mean by to seriously listen.
It's no different than the great classical composers. Yeah. It's you have to, if you want to get what those composers are trying to give us, the message in their music and the musical message, the musical identity that they stamp on the sounds that they compose. You're not going to it's not going to enrich you much if you have it on in the background. It's something where you have to not only
riding up an elevator.
Yeah, you have to listen to the music. You have to work your way up to it because you can go.
It's heavy stuff.
Well, like you don't go to organic chemistry,
right?
In 7th grade.
Yeah, well,
you work your way up to it. So by the time you listen to Beethoven sonatas and then into 19th and 20th century Brahms and Mahler, you have a base, you have a platform. Because if you put that on to a 14-year-old who hasn't spent any time with music, it's going to sound like gibberish.
Exactly. Now, when you say musical messages,
yes,
I know this is sort of it sounds like sort of a dumb question.
Mm-hmm.
Well, musical message is so individualistic.
Yeah.
And how do you separate it from the social and political milieu that these musicians are facing too?
I don't separate it.
Okay, good.
I think that the culture that musicians were born into, the culture and the society that they were raised in, and that the environment that they grew up in, and the environment that they were educated in, is a crucial part of the sounds they make and the sounds they hear, and the combination of influences that they put into their music. I mean, you take people like Bartok and the great Vienna composers and the great composers from even Scandinavia, Sibelius
Yeah.
I mean, their music is a product of their lives, and their lives are built on the blocks that they stepped on to raise their consciousness about how to create art with sound.
As a sociologist, we're also talking about the social and cultural and political milieu that they're in.
Sure.
And we're talking, you can't avoid the issue of race.
Right.
So how much do you think that plays a role in the music?
It plays an insurmountable. There are no adjectives to really describe how American racism affects the environment that those people from Louis Armstrong all the way to today. I mean, African American musicians today are quite vocal about systemic racism in America today. It's a whole bunch different than it was. I mean, Miles Davis was getting beat up by the police. Yeah, you know, he'd walk out of the club and they thought he was whatever they thought, whatever they thought he was, and they beat him up. A lot of musicians, I would say the fortunate ones, left for Europe. A lot of
expatriates. So, and John Coltrane, Love Supreme.
Yes,
I heard the story that he just threw away his alto sax, right?
tenor saxophone,
and beat his chest. I mean, what was?
Well, Train, like all these guys, have their own very unique stories. Yeah, Train came up in the very late 40s, and he was not an early bloomer. He was a late bloomer, actually. He didn't live that long, died at 40. A lot of these guys became heroin addicts.
I was going to get into that. Because waiting to.
Yeah, because, the racism issue and the drug addiction are in some ways melded in the 40s and the 50s and even the 60s. I think the civil rights movement in the 60s made jazz musicians feel like there was some hope.
Right, exactly.
And
then being squelched again.
Yeah.
Assassinations and so on.
And that's the history of America and in some ways the history of the world. Right.
And you touched on the point that it is a universal language. So when people hear the suffering and the pain and so on, it connects to people all around the world.
Yeah, but I think the pain and the suffering that great musicians feel comes out in beauty. They're not playing.
It's a great point.
They're not playing music that invites suffering and explains the pain.
So people trying to turn it into something beautiful.
They transcend it, and that's the beauty of art. Wow. And so if Van Gogh didn't have a great life. He was mentally ill. He didn't sell a painting in his life. Yeah, but
1 year.
Yeah, but everything you look at, his oeuvre of great paintings is pure beauty. We don't see the suffering in Van Gogh. If we want to study the biographies of a lot of jazz musicians, a lot of artists in general, yes, you see pain and suffering, but the beauty of being a great transcendent artist is that you take your own challenges in life and you turn them into hope and beauty, and you create a life of symbols, a life of codes and symbols which lead people into a different way of thinking.
Maybe you were feeling a little of that when you were a young kid as well. So maybe that's what partly it spoke.
Yeah, I think if I was to put one word on it that I see in a lot of musicians that I probably had a sparkle of, it's pure curiosity. It's really you enter this world knowing nothing, and if you're around people who kind of stimulate this feeling that there's so much mystery in the world and there's so much
awe and wonder.
Right.
It's a short time from womb to tomb.
Right.
And what do we do? What are we here? Right. And all that. Yes. And you can't be curious about that. You're
right. I mean,
dead.
This is the ride of a universal lifetime. We have what?
So we're going to say the Rite of Spring.
Yeah,
Stravinsky. Yeah, there's another revolutionary.
Who knew Charlie Parker. Charlie Parker
Really
wanted to get to know Stravinsky. There's a story in California where Stravinsky was living at the time of a bird going up and knocking on his door and then having tea or coffee or wine together. Without repeating what I know about that story, but go look it up if that interests you.
Wow. No. So there is this mixing of some of the classical.
Oh, sure.
You know, listen, I don't know your schedule. I know you're busy with all this. You've got 2 or 3 books in you. No, I'm not. Yeah. I don't know if it's just,
there's a lot of smart people in the world.
No, but there's a lot that you need to write about here. But no, I mean that. Just what we're talking about here. But so tell me a little more about that. The Gershwin, Copeland, Bernstein.
Sure.
Bernstein.
Jazz musicians are completely not only aware of other traditions of music, especially European classical music, but also, I mean, Train and all the bebop guys too were listening to not only classical music but African music and ethnic music. Music is music, and we try to, because in Western civilization at this moment in time, we try to monetize everything. So we have to categorize it. We have to put it in its little cubby hole so it can be sold. Yeah. But what great artists offer us is breaking down those boundaries. Yes, when you listen to jazz, it has certain form and structure. But what comes into that is all the ingredients in the music that comes from many different cultures.
And you're doing that at the festival, right?
That's right.
I forget that you introduced me to a musician when I first met you. Where was he from again?
I think you're talking about Claes Brondell, the guy who was here.
No, I thought it was from Africa somewhere.
Albino Mumbai.
Yeah.
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah.
Albino Mumbai is somebody I've known for about 5 years. He lives up in Boston. He's from Mozambique.
Right.
And he's played the festival a few times, and the people at the Sag Harbor Church fell so much in love with him, they've hired him for like residencies. I'm taking him to a festival that I started in Ibiza, Spain, October 10th through 13th. Spain's become my second home. I always thought it would be Italy, and I love Italy, but somehow I've developed a community in Spain. So I've started in the last 5 years some festivals and jazz events.
And that's
in Spain.
sort of become the crossroads of Africa too.
Yes, right.
Too.
Sure.
It sounds like you've got to get Paul Simon to meet this fellow too. Get him up. Where is he, in Texas now? But he lives around here.
He comes here every once in a while.
Well, we got to get him here.
Yeah, but yes, all modern and classical musicians and jazz musicians, they're aware of each other. I mean, the jazz musicians, the elite jazz musicians of today, most of them have studied in conservatories, which is a whole different thing.
John Baptiste, you've had?
Yes, sure. No, we haven't had John.
Oh, I thought you did. Okay.
No, we've had
Marcellus.
We've had Bradford Marcellus. We've had Whit Marcellus.
Right.
And we
really mix.
I mean, the Marcellus family is well known. They're very elite players. Branford has been in talk shows, and he was at the Jay Leno show, and Whitten has started jazz at Lincoln Center, and he's an international celebrity. So to have those people involved in the festival is very key to us. Right. To put us, I don't need the stamp of approval, but our audience wants to know before they buy a ticket, before they come here, the show that people that this is. That it's passed through the gateway of apprenticeship
approval, sort of.
That it's been approved by people that they know.
Yeah,
that's a hard thing to say.
It's still the Hamptons, and there is this sort of celebrity cachet.
It's true. It's true not only
it's
there.
True anyway. Yeah,
it's true anyway.
Are you getting more young kids? Are young kids coming?
We're working on it. And
how can you get more?
Well, we work With certain organizations, schools, we work with the Hampton Child Care Center.
Mm-hmm.
We work with, there's some groups like drama groups that do plays at LTV, and I go see them and talk to them about
the
jazz.
Cowgirls.
I think
I've had them on the other
Yeah.
side. I've had her.
It's just it's a day-to-day.
That's right.
It's a day-to-day networking thing that
And the Spanish kids in the high school.
Right.
That's another.
We have a person sitting on our board who's involved in some of the Latino organizations out here. So diversity, not only of race, religions, creeds, but of age groups. It's important to us that everybody knows. People will come when they come. People will appreciate the music when they learn to appreciate it or not. But we need to let everybody know that there's this wellspring of music and culture that I and Claes and John have brought out here. And so you don't have to go to New York City to get that fix of great music. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's some classical stuff out here that.
Sounds like there's more venues, unfortunately. Well, fortunately and unfortunately, than you had. Used to be in the city, but they're all much since closed.
Yeah, but
the
bitter end at the bottom line.
Well, the comedy club is still the comic strip, right? Well, that's a whole other. No, but you're right. But of course, the Stephen Talk House is
a great venue. But Peter Stevens Talk House knows what his audience wants. Yeah. So we haven't done any jazz. I'd like to do jazz at Stephen's Talk House, but I think it's a pipe dream. Yeah. But we have great venues out here. The Parish Art Museum. Yeah. Which Jazz at Lincoln Center has sponsoring that, which comes from a relationship I've had with Jazz at Lincoln Center since it first started. We have Smalls Jazz.
You must be so small, so proud of that too.
I'm proud of people who work hard to bring this music to the public and have dedicated their lives to exploring this music and teaching it and entertaining people all over the world. And Jazz at Lincoln Center is among that group of people.
Smalls Paradise?
No, not Smalls Paradise, which was a club up in Harlem. Right. But Smalls Club, which is down in the Village. Run by an amazing gentleman by the name of Spike Wilner, who started, he didn't start Smalls, it was started by a guy by the name of Mitch Borden. But Spike has owned it and managed it for, it's got to be 20 years now. Yeah. And it is, I think it's the singular greatest jazz hang in New York City at this point. And he has a sister club, which is up across the street from one's on east of 7th Avenue and one's on west of 7th Avenue. And the other's called Mesro, which is more of a piano bar. Piano duets, trios, and Smalls is can even do big. It's a small club, but they can do big bands if they need to. But Spike has made an indelible and incredibly valuable contribution to jazz in New York City and really jazz around the world, because he simulcasts every one of his shows, and he's got people watching it in India, in Romania, all over the world. Wow! And and
the connection, that's great. Using the technology, you're bringing me back to my younger days. Cafe Finjan, that was something else, right? That was more Middle Eastern.
Yeah, a club I never went to.
Why not?
It wasn't because of my age, but it was probably because my interest lay elsewhere at that particular point in time.
Well, remember that we've talked about, we're going to work on some sort of
cross-cultural
Israeli Muslim.
That would be great.
We got to do that.
We're all, you're a political person, I'm a political person, so anything we can do to diplomatically bring people together would be an honor for me.
And music is the venue.
Just let me finish Spike.
Sure, please
on Spike. Sure. So Spike is for the last couple of years, he has sponsored uh, three shows this year, and hopefully he'll keep going with us. And Spike and Smalls has a particular kind of vibe.
Okay.
And we try to recreate it here.
What might that be? Sort of?
It's youthful. It's traditional, but a little bit pushing the envelope.
Okay.
It's not necessarily about names. It's just about where great musicians from all over the world come to New York City, because New York City is the mecca of jazz and has been for 50 years or more, 60 years.
Yeah.
And so
52nd Street, right?
Yeah, right. There's no 52nd Street. Moved down to the Village a long time ago, and really now it's in Brooklyn.
Really?
Yeah. All over.
All over Brooklyn.
Bushwick. Some in Park Slope, some in Flatbush.
See, our producer Tiffany knows that probably.
Yeah.
That's where she, right, Tiffany? We'll talk to her after. She probably goes to all these clubs in Brooklyn. We've got to.
But of all the clubs in New York that have survived COVID, and how Spike survived COVID, it was a genius of commitment and creativity, because he couldn't have an audience, but he had jazz there every night filming it.
Filming in the podcast.
Yeah, and I was there like at least once a week. Even if I was out here, I'd go in and.
But you haven't mentioned the clubs in Harlem.
Because you know what? Those clubs were not really around when I started my business, or even when I was. Small's Paradise was there. Minton's was gone. Minton's started and stopped, and I don't think it's around again.
Keyboard play, yeah.
The ones I went to were right below Harlem, the West End Cafe, right across from Columbia. But I did not hang in the 70s or the 80s in the Harlem clubs. I don't think there were a lot of jazz activity in the 70s and the 80s in Harlem. Harlem went through those years were tough for that neighborhood, through AIDS and through drugs and through crime. It was not. Harlem's had its second or third renaissance now, but in those days, in the 70s, 80s, being a white guy from the suburbs, it's not a place that I thought about.
See, now my grandfather artists, and I have pictures in my apartment, as my wife Beatty knows, who just came in here. They would wake up. My grandfather would wake her up at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. They went up to Harlem.
Yeah, I went to the Apollo. That was one of the.
Okay,
that was one of the places I
probably saw you at the West End, even though we didn't know each other.
Yeah.
And then there's another jazz club on 105th and 6th.
Yes, called Smoke.
Smoke, yeah.
It's a great club.
Right.
It has a big following of uptown jazz fans, and they do book great names. And if you see what's happening at Smalls, and you see what's happening at Smoke, and you see what's happening in Brooklyn, and the Village Vanguard and the Blue Note, I bring all those people out here.
And the Latino clubs as well have disappeared. So is it more the economics of the time?
The rents, right?
The rents. There we go.
The rents
control everything.
But you know, the Latino clubs, these things go slightly underground.
Yes,
they're in Brooklyn. They're in the Bronx.
Everything's in Brooklyn now. Yeah,
and the Bronx is coming back. I mean,
Bobby Sanabria,
right? But hip hop started in the Bronx.
Yeah,
and so the American culture, with all of its integration, which maybe I think good things have happened since the 40s, when jazz musicians were really isolated, and there was deep segregation all across this country, and it's not on the books, it's not legal, but you know, black folks and white folks don't mix as nearly as much as we'd like to think they do here in the States. But I think we're making progress. We're feeling a little bit of a setback because Trump and his whole brand of segregationists are making it difficult to put a positive message out there.
Well, we've got only a few more minutes.
Okay.
Here, so we want to end it on an up note.
Yes.
Nothing. I mean, listen.
The up note.
Trump should be.
He will be defeated.
He will be
That's
defeated, and he should hang out on some jazz clubs and
right.
We find his soul. At some point.
Nobody's beyond redemption.
Right. Exactly. Well, if there is, he's the one that is. But no, we've got to come on. We've got to be kind enough to believe that that's possible. Radical love and so on. So listen, you've got what are your plans for? I know it's a year-round festival. You want to make this more international, don't you?
I want to make it a reflection of how I and people around me hear and view what improvised music coming from a jazz tradition, coming from an African American tradition that is now a global phenomenon, and
a source of human liberation.
That's
so needed in the face of the authoritarianism that.
Right.
So you're on a world crusade, whether you know it or not. Here, so
I'm on a mission.
You're on a mission.
Yeah, but
you and the Blues Brothers, right? Okay.
I'd like to make a jazz movie of the Blues Brothers idea.
There you go.
But yes, jazz is a very liberating force. Music is a liberating force. Yeah. Pop music in our day was a liberating force. Yeah. Today, I think hip hop has picked up on aspects of that. And I'm sure rock and roll, because it's the heart of the founders of that music, they were just struggling blues musicians, whether they were British or
and
American.
Don't forget the gospel people, right?
One note about gospel: we've done the Harlem Gospel Choir twice now.
Oh, wonderful!
This year and last year, sellout crowds. Last year it's at South Hampton.
Abyssinian Church they play too.
No, yes, they do play there. But I started listening to them. They do a Sunday brunch at the Blue Note, and that's how
unbelievable.
I talked to the owner, who's a friend of mine at the Blue Note. I said, we got to get the Harlem Gospel Choir out here.
There you go.
So last year,
a nice Jewish guy from Great Neck is sponsoring the.
I like to say Brooklyn first.
Okay, I'm teasing. Listen, you are a godsend here.
Oh, that's too kind.
No, you're just an emissary of goodwill and joy and good music. Seconds we have left. Tell our audience again how they can reach you and how they can attend the festival.
First, thanks for Jim for hosting this show. Made me feel welcome from the get-go. Go to the website, Hampton Jazz Fest, and it's Hamptons with an S, Jazz Fest, one word with a capital F, E-S-T. It's not Jazz Festival, it's Jazz Fest. Yeah. And you'll see the schedule. We don't have a schedule yet for the fall and winter, but that will be coming real soon. And that you can get in contact with me. You can Google my name, Joel, Joel, Chris, Chriss, and you can find me on Facebook. You can text me. I would give my number, but I've had my identity stolen too many times. I don't know why anybody would want to be me, but they seem to want to steal my identity. Look up Joel Chris, look up the Hampton Jazz Festival, look up Claes Brundell, look up John Landis. You'll find us. We'd love to talk with you about jazz music in general, about culture, and about the festival that we're so pleased to bring out to the Hamptons. And hopefully our audience...
You'll see them there.
Yeah, we'll see you there. If you come, I will see you, and come talk to me. And we get such joy out of sharing the music. So come spend time with us.
Thank you. And you've been a joy to have on this show. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
And thank you all for listening to us today on The Radical Imagination. This is Jim Vrettos. We'll see you again next week on The Radical Imagination.